I'll actually start with something that isn't technology at all, but builds on what Ian says, and then I'll get into the technology stuff. So you mentioned about figuring out where you want to go. I think the other piece of this is, unfortunately, today there aren't chief payroll officers. There's usually a CHRO or a CFO that the payroll person's reporting to. You need to figure out how you can align your vision with whoever that person's vision is, because you're not the ultimate decider, which is tough because it's not ideal. But the problem is, if you don't do that, the decision is just going to come down from the top, and then you're just ultimately going to have to veto their decision or not. And that's a lot harder to do than being upfront and going, okay, these are my needs, and this is where I'd like to go, and kind of working hand in hand with them. So where I've seen the most successes with implementations is really around making sure the CHRO and the head of payroll are really in lockstep with where they want to go. And then I think from there, there's a lot of things you need to do to make sure you pick the right technology. I think there's a lot of questions you need to ask. The classic thing are called demonstration scripts, but like, make sure the vendors prove that they can do the things that you need them to do. I think the challenge with global sometimes is you may not fully know what the rules are. But I think, as Ian mentioned and as Menica mentioned, you kind of need to know the rules at least at a high level to know what's possible. If it's not possible in a certain country to pay your employees directly through a local provider, you need to know that, because you're going to have to manage that yourself, right? And you need to know what's possible and what's not possible. But where I usually see people get tripped up are around implementation times, like time it will take to get to the first payroll being ran. So really think about, when do you want to start? What's your goal? So I think that's like the first piece. And then after that, it's like thinking through, does this thing calculate the things I need it to calculate? Does it make the tax payments and filings I expect? Is it going to support, paying employees in the locations that can pay and automate that for me? And in the ones that can't, can it support me in the ways I need it to? I would also look at customer sentiment. Look at the net promoter scores of these companies. There's a lot of companies with really bad customer sentiment scores. You should challenge these companies if they don't have good customer service, because you're probably going to have a lot of challenges if you run into an issue with them. The last thing where I see more things fall apart than anything are integrations. So there's always going to be pieces of your product in payroll that's going to have to integrate with either an HRIS system or a GL system or a time and attendance system or a benefit system or expense system, whatever it is. These are critical integrations. You really should make sure that they're going to work. You need to go maybe just one level deeper than hearing, oh, they support a NetSuite integration. What does that actually mean? Do they support what I want to do with NetSuite? So I think that's the biggest place where failure happens and where there's hiccups. And the challenge is if you miss those things, you're likely going to have to live with either a workaround or just a process gap that will have to be addressed manually. One other thing I forgot to mention, reporting. If there are audits or reports that are a requirement for you to do, just make sure that the client's going to be, or the provider's going to be able to support you in some way to meet those needs.
So I've got integrations. Look for those hiccups and holdups, because they're going to be there likely, and just expect those. Look for those. The demo scripts, have those things available, so you're running through your own process, not through whatever they're putting you through, their assumption about your process, your actual process. Where those areas are that it can and can't support, those sorts of things.